Alright, so this video is going to cover two topics really quickly. First, we're going to talk a little bit more about variables, and if you're tired of hearing about variables, I'm sorry, but some people still having trouble grasping variables. So I want to make it really clear, because if you understand how variables work, it makes everything a whole bunch easier. So again, there are different types of variables. X equals 4, 5, whatever. That's an integer. Y equals 3.2. That is a floating point value. Z equals, hello, that is a string. You can do different things with different types of variables. Now, in JavaScript, we were able to kind of use variables for whatever we wanted to, and JavaScript would kind of make them work. In most languages, including Python, it doesn't work that way. In most languages are what is called strongly typed, which means that when you have a type of variable, you can only do certain things with that type of variable. And I'll give you some examples. So x in this case is an integer. By the way, if you're ever curious about what type of variable you're working with, you can say print type and the variable name, and it will tell you what type of variable that is. So if I run this code right now, I'm going to see that 5 is an integer. If I put quotation marks around it, I'm going to see that 5 is a string. By the way, I can use double quotation marks, doesn't change anything. Single or double, it's still a string. And that again, it's a string. If I type 5.3, actually, or even this, 5.0, and I run it, it is a float. Okay, so each variable type can do certain things. Like, I can do math with integers and floats, but I can't do math with a string. I can capitalize a string, but I can't capitalize an integer or a float. Each one has different things you can do to it. One of the things you can't do is you can't do math with strings. I can't take, even though they look like numbers, I can't take x equals 5, the string 5, and x equals, or y equals 4, the string 4, and multiply them together. Here's what will happen if I try to do that. And so if I say x plus, I'm just going to add them. Or no, I'm going to divide. So x divided by y. Just going to run that. And I can't do it. It says you cannot divide a string and a string. Just can't do it, even if one of them is an integer. So let's say x is a string, y is an integer. Can't do that. Can't divide a string and an integer. What if they're both integers? Oh, yep, I can do that, because you can divide an integer and an integer, and interestingly enough, that will give you a float as the result. So in some cases, Python will convert it, but most of the time it won't. Most of the time, if you want to use a string as an integer, two things have to happen. Number one, it has to look like an integer, and number two, you have to do what's called a type conversion. Or in some languages they call it casting. But so if I have x equals 5, oops, type tonight, and I want to do math with it, I can convert it to an integer. I can say x equals int x. Okay, so what that does is that takes this 5, sticks it in here, and it converts it to an integer, and then it saves it back to its original name. Okay, or to make it less confusing, I could say y is going to be equal to the integer value of x. So now you will see that if I print type x, print type y, that x is a string, y is an integer, because basically what I said is, hey, if this looks like an integer, like it has a digit in there, and I can convert it to an integer, let's do that. So basically, as far as it's concerned, it looks like that. So this is pretty useful. We're going to use this a lot when we take input from a user. But I wanted you to be aware that in Python, you have to know what type of variable you're working with. Now, there's one other thing that I see a lot, and it drives me insane, because I would hope you guys understand variables well enough to understand this, but let me show you anyway. So I see stuff like this. We haven't done print, but like alert, for example. I will see someone do that. What is wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is when Python sees a word or a letter or anything else, first it checks to see if it's a keyword, if it's some kind of command. And print is a keyword, so print doesn't need quotation marks around it, and it's cool with that. And so it looks at what. It says what? Now that's not a keyword, so let me see. It must be a variable because it's not inside quotation marks. So let me see what the word what is equal to. Well, the word what isn't equal to anything because I didn't put quotation marks around this, so it's not a string. So it's looking for a variable named what, and there's not one. If I want it to say, what is your name? It has to be in a string format. Okay, so when and that's not going to work yet. Well, so when I run this, that works great because what is your name is a string, and it can print a string. But if I do this, yeah, see, it doesn't even like that. It's like, what are you talking about? I can't do that because there's like 4 words strung together here, but they don't have quotation marks around them, so it must be 4 variables. But if I got 4 variables, well, I mean, they got to have something in between them. They have something that connects them, because if they actually were variables, now I can't use is as a variable because see it's highlighted, it's a keyword. But if I have what your name, I could say what is equal to hello, and I could say your is equal to there, and I could say name is equal to Joe. Okay, still not going to work because it's just 3, see, it's just 3 words just dangling out there with nothing connecting them. Now, I could string them together like this. I could say, what your name, and it says, hello there, Joe. It doesn't say what your name, because it's not in quotation marks. If I wanted to say what your name with commas in front of it, in between, because I don't know why I'd want to say that, but if I did, got to put quotation marks around it. All right, so that's variables. And understand it. If you don't understand everything I just told you, you need to watch this video again, or you need to talk to me, because if you don't understand this, everything else is going to be really hard. Okay, this is really basic stuff, and if you didn't watch this video, well, you wouldn't have heard me say this if you didn't watch the video, but if you know someone who's struggling with this and haven't watched the video, make them watch this video, because this is fundamental stuff that you just cannot live without if you're going to do programming successfully.